Imagine, if you will, a scene straight out of a drama, unfolding on the hallowed grounds of Buckingham Palace. A brash American officer, his voice cutting through the morning air like a whip, bellows, "Salute me now," before the stoic ranks of the royal guards and a stunned crowd of onlookers. The tension is palpable, the silence of the palace forecourt, shattered by this audacious command. Gasps ripple through the tourists, cameras swivel, and the very air seems to hold its breath. What happened next, you ask? Well, dear friends, that's a tale worth telling, a story of pride, principle, and the unyielding honor of a British soldier. So settle in, wherever you're watching from, be it Cornwall, Yorkshire, or beyond, and let us know in the comments below. And if you're moved by stories of duty and defiance, do hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. You won't want to miss what's coming next on this journey through the heart of our nation's traditions. It was a misty November morning in 2025, the kind of day where the London fog clings to your coat and the world feels hushed under a grey veil. Buckingham Palace stood resolute, its golden stones softened by the haze, as the forecourt buzzed with the quiet anticipation of a special occasion. A NATO summit, no less, bringing dignitaries and military brass from across the globe. The changing of the guard was about to commence, a ritual as old as the monarchy itself, and the crowd was thicker than usual. A mix of tourists, locals, and a smattering of uniformed officers from allied nations. The air carried a faint chill, but there was warmth in the shared excitement. The sense that history was unfolding before their eyes. At the heart of this scene stood Sergeant William Barrett, a royal guardsman of the Coldstream Guards, his scarlet tunic pristine, his bearskin hat a towering emblem of tradition. At 32, Barrett was a man of quiet gravitas, his hazel eyes sharp and unyielding beneath the brim of his hat. A veteran of covert operations in Yemen and Somalia, he had earned the Military Cross for dragging a wounded comrade through a hail of gunfire. His courage matched only by his discipline. To Barrett, serving as a guardsman was no mere ceremony. It was a sacred trust, a continuation of the oath he had taken to the crown. His comrades knew him as a man of few words, but unbreakable resolve, the kind who could face a storm and not blink. To the tourists snapping photos, he was a living statue, a symbol of Britain's enduring pride. Among the crowd, however, was a figure who saw the guards not as symbols, but as relics. Lieutenant Colonel Jackson Hayes, a Army officer, cut an imposing figure in his crisp green uniform, his chest heavy with ribbons from campaigns in Baghdad and Helmand. At 45, Hayes was a man of action, a pragmatist who valued results over ritual. His time in war zones had left him with little patience for what he saw as outdated pageantry. And the royal guards, with their silent vigilance, struck him as a waste of military might. Hayes had arrived in London for the NATO summit with a chip on his shoulder, his blunt manner already raising eyebrows among the diplomatic corps. To him, the pomp of Buckingham Palace was a distraction, and he was determined to make his presence felt. The trouble began subtly, as these things often do, as Barrett stood at his post, his rifle held with parade ground precision. Hayes approached, his boots crunching on the gravel. The crowd parted slightly, sensing the authority in his stride. Hayes stopped just beyond the invisible line that separated the public from the guards, his eyes narrowing as he studied Barrett. "This is what you call soldiering," he said, his voice loud enough to carry across the forecourt, standing like a mannequin while the world moves on. A few tourists chuckled nervously, unsure whether this was banter or something more. Barrett, true to his training, gave no response, his gaze fixed on the horizon. Hayes, undeterred, pressed on. "Back in my day, we fought wars, not played dress-up for tourists. You Brits and your fancy hats. When's the last time you fired that rifle in anger?" The words were a deliberate jab, meant to provoke. But Barrett's silence was absolute, his discipline a wall that Hayes could not breach. The crowd's mood began to shift. A family from Manchester, whispered their discomfort. The father muttering, "That's not on." "Is it?" A group of American tourists, perhaps sensing the breach of decorum, lowered their cameras, their faces uneasy. But Hayes was feeding off the attention, his voice growing louder, his gestures more animated. He stepped closer, far too close, his polished boots inches from Barrett's. "You call this a military? This is a bloody museum piece." He scoffed, his Texas drawl cutting through the mist. The insult landed heavily, and a murmur of disapproval rippled through the crowd. An elderly man, his own chest bearing the faded ribbons of a Falklands veteran, stepped forward, his voice trembling with indignation. "You've no right to speak to him like that. That man's a soldier, same as you, and he's serving his queen." Hayes turned, his lip curling. "Serving? He's a prop. Old man, wake up." The situation might have diffused there, with Hayes retreating under the crowd's disapproval. But his pride wouldn't allow it. Emboldened by Barrett's silence, he crossed a line that no one could ignore. He reached out, his fingers brushing the polished buttons of Barrett's tunic, then grazing the barrel of his ceremonial rifle. The crowd gasped, a collective intake of breath that seemed to suck the air from the forecourt. To touch a guardsman's uniform, let alone his weapon, was a violation of protocol so egregious it bordered on sacrilege. Hayes did it again, his hand lingering on the rifle, his eyes daring Barrett to react. "What's this, then? A toy for the tourists?" he taunted, his voice dripping with contempt. A third touch followed, deliberate and provocative, as if Hayes were testing the limits of Barrett's restraint. The tension was now a living thing, coiling around the scene like the mist itself. The crowd was divided. Some horrified, others transfixed by the audacity of the moment. A young woman from Canada whispered to her friend, "He's going to get himself arrested." A NATO officer in the background, a Danish major, shook his head, muttering about diplomatic fallout. Barrett, however, remained a monument of control. His breathing was steady, his grip on his rifle unwavering. Inside, he was acutely aware of every detail. Hayes' aggressive posture, the crowd's shifting mood, the faint hum of a drone circling above, likely capturing the scene for some news outlet. He knew the stakes not just for himself, but for the honor of the guards, the crown, and the delicate balance of NATO relations. To react prematurely would be to hand Hayes a victory, to tarnish the very tradition he was sworn to uphold. So Barrett waited, his silence a shield, his discipline a sword held in reserve. Hayes, mistaking silence for weakness, pushed further. He squared his shoulders, his voice rising to a commanding bellow. "I am a lieutenant colonel in the United States Army, and I am ordering you, soldier, to salute me now." The demand echoed across the forecourt, a direct challenge to Barrett's duty. It was a calculated move, rooted in Hayes' belief that his rank and the NATO context gave him authority. The crowd froze, cameras poised, waiting for the guardsman's response. For a moment, it seemed the world held its breath, the mist whirling as if to frame the impending clash. Then Barrett moved not with anger, but with the precision of a man who knew exactly what he was doing. His free hand shot out, grasping Hayes' wrist and removing it from his rifle with a controlled, almost surgical force. The movement was swift, professional, and utterly devoid of malice. Hayes flinched, his bravado faltering as Barrett's eyes met his, cold and unyielding. In a voice low but resonant, Barrett spoke, each word carrying the weight of centuries. "I serve the crown, sire, not NATO." The statement was a rebuke, not just to Hayes, but to the notion that rank alone could override tradition. The crowd leaned in, hanging on his words. Barrett continued, his tone measured but firm. "Standing Order 157 of the Household Division, reinforced by the Queen's regulations, establishes that a royal guardsman answers only to the chain of command under Her Majesty. Your authority, with respect, does not extend here." He paused, letting the words sink in, then added, "Furthermore, your actions touching my uniform and weapon constitute 3 violations of protocol. under Military Discipline Act 2006. Section Dash. I suggest you step back. Sir, the precision of his response, the effortless command of law and protocol, left no room for argument. The crowd was silent. Then a slow ripple of applause began, growing into a wave of approval. A British tourist, tears in his eyes, clapped louder, shouting, "Well said, lad." Even some of the American officers in the crowd nodded, their respect for Barrett palpable. Hayes stood frozen, his face a mask of fury and humiliation. He had expected compliance, perhaps a spectacle to bolster his ego. But instead, he had been outmaneuvered by a soldier he had dismissed as a relic. The applause stung, each clap a reminder of his miscalculation. The mist seemed to thicken, cloaking the scene in a surreal haze. As Barrett resumed his post, his posture unchanged, his gaze fixed once more on the horizon. The crowd, now fully on his side, buzzed with excitement, phones capturing every angle of the confrontation. The moment was no longer just a clash of egos. It was a testament to the enduring power of discipline, tradition, and the quiet strength of a man who knew his duty. What happened next would cement Barrett's place in the annals of British pride. Captain Edward Wells, Barrett's commanding officer, emerged from the palace gates, his presence commanding immediate respect. A seasoned officer with a reputation for fairness, Wells had been briefed on the incident by security. He approached Hayes, his voice calm but laced with authority. "Lieutenant Colonel, the Royal Guards operate under a separate chain of command, independent of NATO or any foreign authority on British soil. Your actions have caused an unnecessary disturbance." Before Hayes could respond, Colonel Robert Wilson, a senior U.S. officer attached to the NATO delegation, joined them. Wilson, a grizzled veteran who had worked closely with British forces in Afghanistan, was visibly displeased. "Hayes," he said sharply, "you've overstepped. This is a diplomatic incident, and you'll answer for it." The reprimand was public, deliberate, and devastating. Hayes's jaw tightened, but he said nothing, his isolation complete as even his fellow American officers distanced themselves, some offering Barrett nods of respect. The crowd, now dispersing, carried the story with them. Tourists from Australia, Japan, and the UK shared videos on X, the clips spreading like wildfire. By midday, Buckingham Showdown was trending, with millions viewing Barrett's calm defiance. British users hailed him as a hero. One posting, "That's our Bill," showing the Yanks what real soldiering looks like. Even American commenters, embarrassed by Hayes, praised Barrett's professionalism. One writing, "Respect from Texas. This guy's a class act." Hayes, meanwhile, was left to stew in his own disgrace, his career likely dented by the incident. He stood apart, his face a storm of suppressed rage, as the summit continued without him. As the day drew to a close, Barrett remained at his post, the mist lifting to reveal a golden sunset over the palace. He was unmoved by the attention, his focus as unwavering as ever. To him, the confrontation was not about personal triumph, but about honoring the crown and the traditions it represented. The image of him standing tall, a living statue of duty, became iconic, shared across the globe as a symbol of Britain's unyielding spirit. The lesson was clear. Respect for military cultures, like respect for any tradition, could not be demanded. It had to be earned. Barrett had earned it, not through bluster or force, but through the quiet power of discipline and principle. And so, dear viewers, what do you make of this tale? Have you ever witnessed a moment where honor triumphed over arrogance? Share your stories in the comments. Give this video a like if it stirred your heart, and share it with those who cherish the values of service and dignity. Subscribe and hit that bell. We've got more stories of courage and conviction coming your way every day. Let's keep the spirit of Britain's finest alive. Together, Hayes stood frozen, his face a mask of fury and humiliation. He had expected compliance, perhaps a spectacle to bolster his ego, but instead, he had been outmaneuvered by a soldier he had dismissed as a relic. The applause from the crowd stung, each clap a reminder of his miscalculation. The mist seemed to thicken, cloaking the scene in a surreal haze. As Barrett resumed his post, his posture unchanged, his gaze fixed once more on the horizon. The crowd, now fully on his side, buzzed with excitement, their phones capturing every angle of the confrontation. This was no longer just a clash of egos. It was a testament to the enduring power of discipline, tradition, and the quiet strength of a man who knew his duty. The resolution came swiftly, as such moments demand when the honor of nations is at stake. Captain Edward Wells, Barrett's commanding officer, emerged from the palace gates with the measured stride of a man accustomed to command. At 40, Wells was a seasoned officer, his graying temples and steady gaze marking him as a leader who balanced tradition with pragmatism. He had been alerted by security moments after Hayes' outburst, and had watched the confrontation unfold from a discreet vantage point. Now, he approached with purpose, his scarlet uniform a mirror of Barrett's, his presence silencing the murmurs of the crowd. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes, Wells said, his voice calm but edged with authority. The Royal Guards operate under an independent chain of command, answerable solely to Her Majesty's authority on British soil. Your actions have breached protocol and caused an unnecessary disturbance. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle, his eyes locking onto Hayes. This is sovereign territory, sir, and your rank, however distinguished, does not extend to my men. The rebuke was delivered with the precision of a bayonet thrust, firm, yet devoid of malice. A masterclass in military diplomacy. Before Hayes could respond, a new figure entered the fray. Colonel Robert Wilson, a senior officer attached to the NATO delegation. Wilson, a weathered veteran of 60, with a face etched by decades in conflict zones, had collaborated with British forces in Afghanistan and held a deep respect for their traditions. His presence was a jolt to the crowd, who sensed the gravity of what was unfolding. Wilson's voice was sharp, his southern accent clipped with displeasure. Hayes, you've crossed a line, he said, his tone cutting through the lingering applause. This isn't just a breach of protocol. It's a diplomatic embarrassment. You'll be answering to the Pentagon, and I'll personally ensure it. The public reprimand was deliberate, a signal to all present that Hayes' actions were not condoned by his superiors. Wilson turned to Wells, offering a nod that spoke volumes. My apologies, Captain. This matter will be addressed promptly. The exchange was brief but seismic, cementing Hayes' isolation. The American officers in the crowd, who had initially watched with curiosity or amusement, now distanced themselves, their body language aligning with Barrett and Wells. A Marine captain, his own uniform heavy with decorations, approached Barrett after the incident, extending a hand. Hell of a stand, Sergeant, he said, his grip firm. You've got the respect of every man in my unit. The crowd, too, was transformed by the encounter. The tourists who had begun the morning snapping selfies now stood in quiet awe, their phones still recording, but their expressions reverent. The British among them swelled with pride, their cheers and applause a testament to their faith in the Guards. A retired postman from Bristol, his scarf fluttering in the breeze, turned to his wife and said, "That's our country, right there, steady as a rock, just like in my father's day." Even the international visitors were moved. A Japanese family, their guidebook forgotten, bowed slightly in Barrett's direction, a gesture of respect that needed no translation. An Australian backpacker, his camera still rolling, posted on X, just saw a British soldier shut down an arrogant officer with pure class. This is why you respect tradition. The sentiment spread rapidly, with videos of the incident amassing millions of views within hours. Hashtags like Buckingham Showdown and crown over NATO trended globally, as people from Cardiff to California debated the clash of military cultures. Hayes, meanwhile, was left to stew in his own disgrace. He stood apart from the dispersing crowd, his face a storm of suppressed rage and humiliation. His earlier swagger was gone, replaced by a rigid silence as he realized the scale of his error. The other NATO officers avoided him, their conversations pointedly excluding the man who had tarnished their delegation's reputation. A French colonel, speaking quietly to a German counterpart, was overheard saying he thought he could bully a guardsman. Foolish man. Hayes' career, already marked by a reputation for abrasiveness, now faced a serious blow. Whispers among the American contingent suggested he would be recalled to Washington for a formal review. His hopes of further promotion dimmed by this public misstep. Yet, in that moment, he was alone, a figure diminished by his own hubris, watching as the crowd's admiration flowed to Barrett. As the summit continued inside the palace, the incident rippled outward, shaping perceptions and sparking conversations. Barrett remained at his post, the mist lifting to reveal a golden sunset that bathed the palace in a warm, almost ethereal glow. His figure, motionless and resolute, became an iconic image shared across news outlets and even military forums as a symbol of Britain's unyielding spirit. The British press seized on the story with gusto. The Telegraph ran a front-page feature, "The Guardsman Who Stood Firm," praising Barrett's quiet heroism. The Times offered a reflective editorial, a lesson in respect at Buckingham Palace, while The Sun, ever colorful, declared, "Young officers schooled by our bill." Even American outlets covered the incident, with some expressing embarrassment at Hayes' conduct and others lauding Barrett's professionalism. CNN ran a segment titled "When Tradition Meets Temper," featuring retired generals who praised the guardsman's restraint. The incident prompted quiet discussions within NATO, with senior officials issuing internal memos, reinforcing the need for cultural sensitivity among Allied forces. A British diplomat, speaking off the record, noted, "It's a reminder that our traditions are not props. They're the backbone of who we are." The story's deeper meaning resonated long after the day ended, particularly for those of us who've lived through the changes of the last century. It was a reminder that military honor is not about loud displays of power, but about the quiet strength of discipline, sacrifice, and respect for the traditions of others. Barrett's stand was a testament to the importance of understanding the systems we encounter, especially in a world where alliances like NATO depend on mutual respect. His actions showed that true authority cannot be imposed through arrogance. It must be earned through humility and adherence to principle. For the British public, especially those of us who remember the days when deference to tradition was a given, Barrett became a hero, a man who embodied the values we hold dear: duty, dignity, and an unwavering commitment to the crown. In village halls and city pubs, from the cobbled streets of York to the windswept cliffs of Dover, his story was told with pride, a modern parable of a soldier who faced down hubris and won. As the sun set over London, Barrett's silhouette against the palace gates was a powerful image, one that would linger in the collective memory of a nation. He was not just a soldier, but a guardian of something greater, a legacy of service that stretched back through the ages, from the battlefields of Waterloo to the ceremonial heart of the monarchy. For those who witnessed it, and for the millions who would hear the tale, his stand was a call to honor the principles that bind us as a people. It was a reminder that the guards, with their scarlet tunics and bearskin hats, are not mere symbols, but men and women of flesh and blood, carrying the weight of history in every step. Barrett's calm defiance, his refusal to bend under pressure, spoke to the soul of Britain, a nation that has weathered wars, upheavals, and change, yet remains steadfast in its values. And so, dear friends, what does this story stir in your heart? Have you ever seen someone defend their honor with such quiet power, standing firm against the tide of arrogance? Perhaps you've a tale of your own. From the days of national service or a moment when you saw tradition upheld against the odds, share your stories in the comments below. We'd love to hear them. Give this video a like if it moved you, and share it with those who cherish the ideals of service, respect, and the enduring strength of our nation. Subscribe and ring that bell, for we've more tales of courage and conviction to come, each one a tribute to the heart of Britain. Let's keep the flame of honor burning bright, together for the generations past and those yet to come.